Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Dumb Robot, and this is part 2 of my beginner's guide to ZBrush and creature design. When we last left off, we learned how to use the basics of using Z-spheres to create the basic skeleton and mesh for our creature, the Dover Demon. In case you missed it, you can check out the previous video in the series by clicking right here. So in this video, we're going to be going over navigating your viewport, making your model editable, a quick look at the subtool, your brush panel, and the right-click menu. And then after that, we're going to be going and building out the anatomy and the landmarks of the Dover Demon, and going over a few other tools like your height selection tools and a few others. Alright, real quick before we get started, I just wanted to show you guys, just to make sure that you know how to navigate the viewport. So pretty much, when you make an object, let's just pick this little cylinder looking thing here. So you create that. Just make sure you enable edit, and then pretty much how you're going to navigate the viewport, which this whole area is the viewport. So what you'll do is you'll just click into this empty space here, and then you'll just drag it around, and that's pretty much how you rotate around the center of the object. And you can do snapping by holding shift. So if I'm rotating and I hold shift, it'll just snap to one side or the other, pretty much whatever face it thinks is the closest. And then if you want to scrub the object, for instance, you'll hold Alt, and you'll click, and then you can scrub the object around like that. And then if you want to zoom, what you'll do is when you're doing the Alt click, you'll just let go of Alt, and then you'll just drag your mouse or your cursor, and you can zoom in and out. Now as you can tell, this perspective is off as well. So if you want to have more of a normalized perspective, there's a perspective button right here, or you can just hit with P, and then that'll give you more of a proper realistic perspective. And if you need to see the floor to give you a proper idea of where on the plane your model is going to be, you can pretty much just hit the floor button, and as you can see, I'm completely sideways in the view. So, so if I go ahead and rotate that over, if I can, just snap it, there you go. Now you can see where the bottom of the object is going to be displayed. So this way you're not modeling something upside down on accident. And if you want to turn the floor off or on, you just hit this right here, where you can turn perspective on and off as you need it. Another useful tool you can use is to check the poly count of your object, is you can come down here and you can hit this poly frame. Shift F for the hotkey. And this will let you see all the polygonal edges of your model, which has its uses, but we won't be using that too much in this tutorial. And another useful thing that we may use here, and that is a good thing to know just in case, is say you're sculpting on your model, whatever it is, and you're zoomed in really far, and you can't really see any of the viewport. So now you can't rotate around your object. So you're pretty much screwed. But what you can do is you can come up to these right here, which lets you change other things with the viewport. So you got the scroll, so if you need to adjust the actual location of the viewport, you can slide that around, or you can zoom in and out. And you might wonder what the point of this is, and what this allows you to do is, if you're zoomed in like this, you can select the area here outside of your viewport, and then now you have the same ability to rotate, to scroll it, and to zoom in and out. Also note that you can rotate the viewport by rotating or selecting within this lined area as well, and it'll have the same effect. So adjust your viewport as needed, and if you need a little more space, if you're cramped, and these menus over here are taking up your view, you can just collapse the divider, and now it'll increase your space. So if you want to have it more zoomed in all the way, you can zoom in all the way, or you can leave it zoomed out more if you need the extra space. Alright, I hope this helps, and let's get started. Okay, and to start off, we're going to go ahead and select the Make Polymesh 3D, and that's going to allow us to edit the sculpt of our creature. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and select our brush panel, and we're going to select the Move brush. But as you can see, there's a buttload of brushes in here, and I'm not going to go over all of them right now. So a quick way to sort through these is just hit the M button, and that'll sort out everything that starts with the letter M. And then we're going to select the Move Topological brush. The Move brush basically allows you to pull and push geometry. So this is pretty handy when you just kind of need to move bits of your sculpture around. The next brush we're going to select is called the clay buildup brush, and this is going to be one of your main go-to brushes that you'll be using for building out most of your sculpture and even some of the finer details. So when you're using the clay buildup brush, normally, as you can see right there, it'll build up the geometry with this kind of square clay-like section. But if you hold down Alt, it'll start subtracting areas of your model to help create those recessed areas. Pretty much what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be using the clay brush to build out the major landmarks of the body. So the major muscle groups and bones, we're going to build them up, and then some of the recessed areas, we're going to sink those down. So we're just going to keep laying out the major muscle groups of our creature. Now, it's probably best practice that when you're doing this part of the anatomy building, to have references. I like to have muscle references up, and it's just to make sure I'm being consistent with the humanoid look that we're going for. You don't want to start mixing up muscle groups or putting muscles where they shouldn't be. It's got to still make some sort of sense when you're looking at it. So I try to build out the area for the upper back and what's going to be the ribs and the shoulders here. And I smooth it out. And what you can see is when you're smoothing it out like that, you build up the geometry using the clay brush, and then you can smooth it out some. And the way you smooth out the geometry that you build up is you just hold the shift key, and then while holding the shift key, just brush over the areas that you want to smooth. Sometimes I like to leave it unsmooth, and it kind of gives it a little bit of a wiry mesh. Well, not a wiry mesh, but like a fibery look to it for muscles. Alright, we're just going to build out a little bit more of the triceps here. Probably not the best layout for it. I have to go back and kind of fix it a little bit more later. Start laying out parts of the forearm. And the forearms initially came out really cylindrical, so I try to flatten it out some to simulate the shape that your arm is going to have with the radius and the ulna. It's important to remember that in these early stages, it's okay to make mistakes. You can always go back and fix anything that you need to try to alter later. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the geometry panel. Now what this will allow you to do is to increase and to decrease the subdivision levels of your polygons. And polygons are what's comprising the surface of your creature. Like if you look at the shoulders, you can see like little squares. So when you increase the subdivision levels, you're essentially increasing the number of squares. And when you do that, you can create higher levels of definition in your sculpts. So I went ahead and I lowered the subdivision level, and what that's going to let me do is move larger areas of the model more easily. So another thing we're going to need to cover real quick is what you're seeing right now, and that's using the masking tools, and that's a way we can isolate geometry from the rest of the mesh. So let's go over that real fast. Alright, the masking tool. What is it? What does it do? Well, a mask is an area that's basically shielded from the rest of your model when you're sculpting. So if you're going to go and create a new model, for instance, let's just go ahead, let's use this gear thing. Create a gear, edit it. Alright, so now it's ready for us to go and, we're going to make Dynamesh 3D. Alright, so now it's ready for us to go and make our edits onto it. Let's say we only want to edit a really specific part, but without affecting the rest of the mesh. So what we can do is use a mask, and how you activate your basic mask, which is going to be your paint masks tool, you just hold Control, and as you can see, the cursor has changed yellow and it says mask on it, and you pretty much just paint it, and it creates this darkened area. Now the darkened area is going to be the spot that's going to be what's currently masked. So now that area is masked, if I try to paint or try to brush, it won't brush over the part that I masked. As you can see, like I can go over it and only get that spot. Maybe it can be illustrated better with a different shape, but it kind of gives you the gist. And you can also invert this. So say I want to be able to sculpt only this spot and not the rest of it. So what you can do is you just hold Control for the mask, and you'll just click out here. And now it's inverted the masking. So now you can just sculpt in this one spot and leave the rest alone. Alright, so now that you kind of know how the basic brushing mask works, you're going to probably want to figure out how to get out of this without just inverting it. And pretty much the way to deselect your masked area is just go ahead and hold Control for your mask tool again, and then just click and then drag, and then that'll deselect it. And then that dragging feature is actually going to be the next part of using the masking tools, and that's using the, pretty much the drag rectangle tool. So you'll do the same thing. You'll just hold control for your mask, and then you'll click outside here, but you hold down, and then you can drag out this square. And then pretty much any part of your sculpt that gets caught within this square will then become more or less selected by the masking tool. And then it functions the same exact way. And you can invert it if you need to. Alright, there's a couple more interesting things we can do. So when you have this area selected, what you can do is you can feather it. And pretty much what that means is you'll be softening the edges that you have masked off pretty much. So say you had like a really hard masking line right here, and you wanted it to be a little softer for the transition. What you can do is you can hold control again, and you'll just click inside of this area that you have masked off. So you just click it, and you'll see how it softens it up. And you click it again, and it'll kind of, the more you do it, the more it'll soften it up for like a smoother transition. And the last thing we're going to cover for this masking tool is the lasso masking tool. So we're just going to go ahead and deselect all this. And then what you can do is when you're holding control for the mask tool is you come up to this brush. You can see that the brush changes every time you activate the mask tool. And it's currently set to a brush. So you just click in here, and then you'll see all these different masking tools that you can use. Got a circle. So for instance, you can draw a circle instead of a square. Whichever one really is more useful to you. I kind of like the square, so I'll just leave it on that. But you also have a mask pen, mask lasso, mask curved pen, and just mask curve. So the lasso is pretty easy to use. So if you just select your lasso, and you just do the same thing, you hold control, and then this time you'll draw it out, as opposed to it creating a shape. You just draw whatever shape you need, and then that'll mask it out for you. So you just make a figure 8 or something like that. Some weird shape if you need it. It doesn't look so good on this because this is kind of low resolution, but if you had a higher resolution, the lines for your mask will come out a lot cleaner. And what are some of the other ones? Maybe we can mess with the mask curve. So mask curve. Okay, so you drag it out and it creates this line. And then you see this shadowy spot? How like on one side of the line it's shadowed and on the other it's not shadowed. So what you would do is you can draw it out, and then when you split an area like this, the side that's going to be shadowed will become selected. So you can do some like quick selects if you need to. And just do the same thing, just draw off to deselect it. Alright, before I forget, there was actually something I missed. So there's a way to unmask it without, like unmasking an area without unselecting the whole thing. So say you mask this area, for instance, but you don't want to lose the whole thing. So if you have an area masked and you just want to unmask a little bit, so you just want to do just this part, you would hold Control and Alt, and then you'll see on the cursor how it'll say mask plus when you have just Control, but then when you hold Alt, it'll change to mask minus. That means it'll subtract the masking area that you've already painted on. So that helps just to reduce the areas instead of like losing the whole thing, for instance. And then there's one other tool, you may have seen it just a second ago, is when I created this green box. And what you do for this, and what it does pretty much, is it acts like the masking tool, but instead of opposed to just selecting the area, it'll actually hide it. So you do that by holding Control and then Shift, and you'll see the cursor change again. And then when you drag out the box this time, it'll create this green square. And then that will hide everything that's not selected. And it works otherwise completely the same way. So if I try to draw here, I can't really. If I try to paint up here, it does just the edges like it would with the masking tool. And if you want to invert it, you hold Control and then Shift, and you make another little box. But instead of it deselecting everything, it'll invert it. But if you want to just deselect it all and have everything be shown again, you'll hold Control, Shift, and you'll just click, and that'll bring everything back. Okay, let's jump back into our creature. And as you can see, the head shape has changed. I just went back and I redid pretty much how I laid out the Z-spheres and then worked my way back up to where we were. I just didn't like the shape. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to isolate, if I can find the right tool, I'm going to isolate the head from the rest of the body so that I can edit it a little more easily using the same masking tools that we used before. Just want a little bit more of the neck involved. Alright, now that I have the rest of the head, we're going to go ahead and use Dynamesh and I'm going to show you guys how to use that little tool that I've been popping up there, that extra little window. Okay, so this little menu you saw before is pretty much a right click menu. So that's pretty much all you got to do is you just anywhere inside your canvas, even on top of your sculpture, you just right click anywhere and you can bring up this little menu. And this gives you all kinds of little quick options. You can change the material for your sphere, or you can grab a whole new object if you want, insert a whole new object. You can change your brush, bring up the brush panel. You can, and this is what I like to use it for mostly right here, is there's these options here for to change your brush. So you can change the actual brush size, you can make it bigger or smaller, and you can change dang it, if I can just keep it up, the focal shift. And the focal shift is pretty much, if you're looking at your brush, it's got an inner and an outer circle. So that's what changes, that's what the focal shift is the space between the inner and the outer circle. And so that kind of changes the hardness of the brush, more or less. So the smaller the inner circle, the softer the edges of the brush are going to be. And the larger the inner circle is to the outer circle, that means the stiffer the brush is going to be. So if I go ahead and do this, you can see that it makes a very stiff brush. But if I change it and I make it soft, then it'll have a much softer brush to it. And that's one of the quick options that I use a lot as well. There's also this Z intensity too, and this will change the strength of the brush. So for instance, if you make it really low, and if you press hard, you get like practically no effect. Like I'm actually pressing pretty hard right now, and you're not seeing any difference. But if I change the Z intensity up to 100, and I draw really lightly, then you'll see a pretty deep effect. If I press really hard, it'll come up. So it's pretty much like when you're in Photoshop, for instance, and you can change the brush strength. It's basically that same effect. You can make it weak or hard, depending on how you want to do it, and you can just change the intensity of it. Here's another quick tip, actually. If you don't know what something does, for instance, ZBrush has this nice little feature. So say, like, I don't remember what this one does. When you're hovering over it with your cursor, you can hold Control, and this will give you a little quick rundown of what it is. So it says, if RGB intensity is less than 100%, tools apply colors more faintly. So I guess that's if you're painting. But that little control bit to explain things for you, you can do it with any tool that's in ZBrush. So if you don't know what something is, you can just go over it, hold Control, and it'll give you a little description of what it is. It's a really handy tool that they do that, and I kind of wish more software would do that. It's pretty awesome. Alright, so this tutorial is getting just a wee bit too long, so we're going to go ahead and skip through this and give you a little preview of what we'll go over in the next video, and that's using the Dynamesh tools inside of the geometry panel and the subtool panel. And we'll go ahead and in that next video, we're going to work on creating a skull that we're going to use on this creature, and it's going to be a replacement for this little placeholder skull that you're currently seeing. So we're going to go ahead and bust out this placeholder skull real quick, and then we're going to go over and build out the rest of the major landmarks for the anatomy of our creature. Alright, and there is the base for our Dover Demon. Pretty much we're going to stop here. The video is getting pretty long. But in the next video, we're going to go ahead and start getting ready to add all the more intricate details. We've got a really good base here, I think. We've laid out our landmarks pretty good. We got like the ribs, we got the spine protruding, got the stomach looking all right here. And so like we can go and fix the toes a little bit more so they can be articulated in the future. Add a little bit more geometry to the hands for knuckles, make the hands look a little more bony, but a lot of that will come out in the high poly. And I'll probably make a separate video covering Dynamesh and the subtool, and we'll pretty much in those videos remake the skull, and then we'll bring that skull into here. We can kind of compare them. This was just like a kind of a placeholder one. I didn't have any references for it, so we'll go back and do that together.